Hey, John Sonmez from SimpleProgrammer.com. So I got a question today that I'm going to answer that is really interesting. It's something that I've struggled with in the past, and I think a lot of people struggle with, especially if you're trying to make it as an entrepreneur and get out of kind of the rat race, get out of this trap, and maybe, well, especially if you're a consultant, because a lot of times someone will leave their regular job, become a consultant, working for themselves, and then realize that they're in a different kind of a rat race. So this question is from David, and he asks, or he says, I've been subscribed to your newsletter for a while, but I haven't seen my conundrum addressed yet. I have a regular stream of consulting income coming in right now, doing small websites for mostly local businesses. I have a SaaS application, and software as a service. I had working in the back of my mind for honest to God a decade. Nobody has created in that time. It's a niche market, but huge with tens of thousands of potential customers in the US alone. My problem is one of money now or money later. Money now always wins. I'd love to see this issue addressed in one of your blog posts or as a chapter in a book or something. Keep up the good work, David. So, David, first of all, I actually did address this to some degree in my soft skills book, which was just released on Amazon. If you go to Amazon and search for soft skills, the software developer's life manual is mine, not there's a couple of other ones out there, but I do address this on a chapter of basically about quitting your job on how to do that, and I talk a little bit about kind of how to get into this, but I want to talk a little bit more in depth about this because this is a really good question. This is a really hard problem that I've struggled with. I still struggle with sometimes, but I know, for sure that a lot of entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs struggle with this problem. This was something for a while that I had problems with because I wanted to quit my regular job and become a full-time consultant, which I did, but then I realized I was still trading dollars or trading hours for dollars, which was something I didn't want to do. I wanted to have sort of a passive income stream coming in, even if it's, there's nothing that's truly passive income, right? You're working for it, but you're selling a product. You're doing something that is not directly trading those hours for those dollars. And so as a consultant, I found that I didn't have a lot of time to work on these things that didn't pay me any money, but I knew I needed to do long term. Now, eventually, I ended up, my solution for getting out of this was at night and in the mornings and on weekends, I recorded Pluralsight videos, I did blog posts, I did YouTube videos, I worked on these long-term projects that didn't really pay me much money up front or anything up front for some of them. And I worked my full-time job while doing this or did consulting. And then after a couple of years, I was able to generate enough passive income to be able to essentially quit my job and do this full time. And here I am at Simple Programmer now. And I don't do much consulting, to be honest with you. I do some consulting still on a case by case basis, but I try to devote almost all my energy to these money later projects because I find that they pay off more in the long run. They're more rewarding for me and they have a longer tail to them. So how do you get there, right? How do you get to that point? There's a lot of people struggling with this. If you listen to the Entre Programmers podcast, you can hear us talking about this essentially a lot of the time. What we basically call it is we say getting free. When are you going to get free? How are you going to get free? And getting free means basically having passive income or this money later income being what supports you as opposed to you having to go work at a job or you having to go put in billable hours to survive. So the first step that I would recommend here is to reduce expenses as much as possible. I did an interview with Amir Rajan, who had the #1 app in the Apple App Store, and he talked about how he went on a sabbatical from his work and he basically saved up enough money to live and he reduced his expenses. So he sold a lot of his stuff. He got a 1-bedroom apartment with his wife and he cut it down. So it didn't cost him much to live at all. So the lower your expenses are, the less you need to be out of the rat race, the less you need to be free. So that's kind of the first place I would start, is cut down expenses as much as possible. It's going to make things as easy as possible. This is hard. It takes some discipline, but you can get down there where where you're living off of a lot less, maybe half of what you're living off now. It might be downsizing your house. It might be, some extreme things, but how bad do you want this dream, right? How bad do you want this? That's a question you have to ask yourself. Okay, so that's kind of the first thing, because that's going to make it easier to get free. Now, the next thing that I recommend is to, and I say this a lot, but take about an hour of your time, the first hour of your morning, and devote that for you. Pay yourself first. And in this case, it would be paying yourself first by working on your SaaS application or working on your money later type of projects. It might be writing blog posts, it might be doing things that are money later, that it's not billable hours. And the reason why you're going to do this first is because you want to devote your freshest time to it. You want to make sure it happens. And you kind of have to have this ratio, right? And you could start to modify this ratio over time. But basically, you might start off as 90% billable hours and 10% working on the SaaS app. So we could say that it's 90% money now and 10% money later. And as you develop this money later, as that money later starts to pay off, which will take some time, it might take a year or two before you even see a dime, right, of profitability, especially when you're only devoting 10% of your time. But eventually it will, right? And this is a smart way to do it, as opposed to just quitting saving up a bunch of money and trying to like have a go at it for 6 months or a year, burning through your savings. When you do it that way, it's like you've got a gun to your head, and the stress is going to make it very likely that you're going to fail. Plus, even if you don't have that stress, you're probably going to fail a few times on your idea. It's probably not going to work right the first time. So I recommend devote the small amount of time consistently. Over time, what's going to happen is that ratio is going to change. So you're going to start making money from these money later things. Hopefully, if some of them pay off, and then you're going to use that money to live off of. If your expenses are lower, you might get a jump start on this, and eventually that ratio is going to change. So now you might be at like 60% money now and 40% money later, right? And so eventually your goal is to get to almost 100% money later. If you listen to the Entrepreneur's podcast, I think Derek Bailey, my buddy on there, I think he's probably about 50% and 50%, right? So he's doing consulting for 50% of his time, and he's working on his own products for 50% of the time. But his goal is to get free. He wants to get to this point where his SaaS products, the products that he's selling, the money later type of things, generate enough income that it replaces that consulting income, and he's technically free. Maybe he would still do some consulting because he enjoys it or whatnot, but he could really essentially become free. So that's sort of my answer here. It's a difficult problem. There's not really an easy solution for this. The biggest thing I can tell you to jumpstart is to reduce your expenses, though, because if you can get to the point where your expenses are really low, so maybe you only have to work 10 hours consulting per week, then you can devote 30 hours to money later stuff. Now, there is one caveat I have to tell you, that this is what it is being an entrepreneur, and I have to tell you, it's risk, right? You may sacrifice a lot of time that you never get paid for, and this is one of those things. When I started Simple Programmer, when I wrote a book, any project that I create, there's a good chance that I'm going to spend 3 months working on this thing and not make a dime or make a very small amount of money. Now, luckily, I haven't run into too many of those, but there's been, a few of those mobile apps. But anyway, it's something to consider. So there's going to be a risk involved. Being an entrepreneur is synonymous with taking risks, but you can reduce that risk if you don't just go whole hog and try to jump into quitting your job and just going full time onto a product and eating at your savings. But you kind of gradually work into this. That's how you bootstrap yourself. That's how I've done it. That's how a lot of successful people have done it. Some people have just jumped off the deep end and have succeeded, but a lot of them are sitting at the bottom of the pool. Well, I hope that helps, David. Thanks for the question. If you have any questions, leave a comment here. Email me at john@simpleprogrammer.com. I'd be happy to do a video on your question. And if you like this video, if you think it'll help someone, share it out. But make sure you subscribe so that you can keep getting these videos and keep learning or keep making fun of me. Whatever you want to do. Take care.